Hello, I'm Takumi. Today's theme is parallel worlds and the law of attraction. Today, I'm going to talk about how your life is determined by the parallel worlds stored in the quantum information space. In fact, your life is decided by which parallel world you observe. Furthermore, successful people are unconsciously parallel shifting to their desired world lines. There are 7 common characteristics among people who do this. This is actually based on the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, a theory that physicists worldwide are debating with absolute seriousness. This video is the definitive guide, thoroughly analyzed and compiled by me, a former quantum mechanics researcher. So, please make sure to watch until the very end. I often receive consultations like, for some reason, I always keep repeating the same mistakes, or I'm working as hard as I can. Yet, I feel like my life is constantly stuck. Have you ever experienced this yourself? Before you know it, you're pulled back to your old reality and you start thinking, maybe the law of attraction doesn't really exist after all. But if that's how you feel, I want you to know it's absolutely not because you lack effort or talent. The true cause is simply that you are unconsciously continuing to observe a parallel world that you don't actually want. In other words, you are unconsciously continuing to choose the world line of your unsuccessful self, built from past failures, even today. That is precisely why I want you to learn the secret I'm going to talk about today. So, how can we intentionally choose the parallel world we desire? Before we dive into those specifics, I have one quick announcement. Actually, I'm currently hosting a limited time web seminar that goes one step deeper than today's topic, explaining how to specifically rewrite physical reality from the information space. Since this covers content I can't share here on YouTube, it's only available for a limited time. I've included the details in the description, so please make sure to grab it before the distribution ends. First of all, why am I talking so seriously about parallel worlds, which sounds like something straight out of science fiction? I'll begin by explaining the scientific basis for it. Actually, most people are under the assumption that only one absolute reality exists in this world. However, in the world of quantum mechanics, the world operates under entirely different rules. To start, what exactly is a quantum? It refers to the smallest unit of matter, such as electrons or photons. And this quantum world operates on strange rules where our common sense doesn't apply at all. Its greatest characteristic is its duality. It behaves like a wave when it's not being observed, but manifests as a particle the moment it is observed. This fact was revealed through the famous double-slit experiment. Even if you fire quanta one by one, as long as they are not observed, those quanta pass through both slits simultaneously as if they were waves, creating an interference pattern. But you might think this is only for tiny particles, like electrons, right? It probably has nothing to do with our lives. However, this mysterious phenomenon is not limited to tiny entities like electrons. For example, it has been confirmed that the same thing happens with giant molecules called fullerenes, which are shaped like soccer balls. Fullerene is an electronic material I used to work with every day during my time as a researcher. When dozens of these fullerenes cluster together, you can actually see their shapes when looking through a state-of-the-art transmission electron microscope. It has been confirmed that even macromolecules of that size exhibit quantum effects where, despite being a single particle, they become a parallel existence and pass through 2 holes at the same time. Even more surprisingly, research from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology has detected quantum fluctuations, even in a mirror weighing as much as 40 kilograms. This means that at the forefront of physics, the limits of how large an object can be while still exhibiting quantum effects remain unknown. It is possible that this phenomenon is occurring even at our human-sized scale. The famous thought experiment that illustrates this strange concept is Schrödinger's cat. In this experiment, a cat is placed in a box along with what you might call a quantum die. If the die rolls a specific number, poison gas is released and the cat dies. The setup is designed so that after 1 hour, the probability is exactly 50%. Now, here's the question. Until you open the box and check inside, is the cat alive or is it dead? Common sense would tell us it must be determined as one or the other. However, in the realm of quantum mechanics, it's different. It is believed that until an observer opens the box, both the world where the cat is alive and the world where the cat is dead exist simultaneously. But the truth is, this is no longer just a thought experiment. Recently, a research team at ETH Zurich succeeded in replicating this experiment. In this experiment, they used a small device, roughly the size of something visible to the naked eye, instead of a cat. They confirmed through the experiment that this device was in a quantum state, a superposition of 2 states, just like Schrödinger's cat. In other words, this is a somewhat shocking experiment that demonstrated that the strange quantum rule, where reality is not determined until observed, can occur even in a world of visible scale. In this story, leads to an even more shocking conclusion. The reality that you see and the reality someone else sees might be fundamentally different. That is the Wigner's friend experiment. Let's consider an experiment with a nested structure. A friend performs a Schrödinger's cat experiment while another person, Wigner, observes from the outside. For the friend, the moment they open the box, the cat's life or death is determined. However, what about from the perspective of Wigner, who is on the outside? Until Wigner hears the result from the friend, two worlds, the friend seeing the living cat and the friend seeing the dead cat, exist in a state of superposition. Then, in 2019, Heriot-Watt University reproduced this thought experiment through an actual experiment. The result was astonishing. It was confirmed that a discrepancy in the observed reality occurred between the role of Wigner and the role of the friend. In this experiment, a violation of Bell's inequality was also confirmed. The fact that a violation of Bell's inequality was observed means that quantum behavior was occurring. This suggests the possibility that instead of one absolute reality existing, each and every one of us is observing our own unique universe, a private reality. Isn't this quite mind-blowing? If this world is a collection of different realities for each observer, what kind of structure does it have? The hint that helps us understand this is the cutting-edge theory of physics, superstring theory. According to this theory, it is said that our universe might actually have a structure of as many as 11 dimensions. First, what exactly is a dimension? Simply put, it is the number of directions you can move. Dimension 0 is the world of a point where you cannot move in any direction. The first dimension is the world of a line where you can move horizontally. Second dimension is the world of a plane where you can move vertically and horizontally. And the third dimension is the 3D world we live in where you can move vertically, horizontally, and in height. What's important here is the rule. Shifting and stacking one lower dimension results in one higher dimension. Now, what happens if we shift the 3D space we are in even further? Since we have already shifted in 3 directions, fundamentally, we cannot shift any further spatially. If we consider shifting the positional information of matter within the 3D universe, it can be regarded as the passage of time. In other words, the 4th dimension is time, and our world is considered a 4D spacetime. Now, let me explain what happens if we shift that 4D spacetime even further. Since we can no longer shift in terms of space or time, we must consider a world where different events occur at the same time and in the same location. This means the 5th dimension is the realm where countless parallel worlds exist. In essence, the 5th dimension is the history of the universe itself. Furthermore, I believe the 6th dimension involves the parameter of personality, asking, from whose perspective is this universe being viewed? The 6th dimension is the dimension of personality that determines who is observing the 5D parallel worlds. Following that logic, the 7th dimension will require stacking these 6-dimensional shifts, potentially making it a shared universe, a collection of private realities where multiple personalities coexist. There might even be a godlike entity overseeing that realm. In other words, we might be like cells branched off from this 7th-dimensional God. Moreover, there is the possibility of a nested structure, an 8th-dimensional higher God representing variations of the 7th-dimensional world, followed by even higher dimensional deities beyond that. It gets confusing when you think about it this way, but from our perspective as 4D inhabitants, higher dimensional worlds are difficult realms that are impossible to prove. There is a famous novel called Flatland, and from the viewpoint of people in a 2-dimensional world, they cannot imagine the direction of height. So, if a 3-dimensional being enters a 2-dimensional world, it appears as if an object suddenly emerges from empty space, its thickness changes, and then it abruptly vanishes. Yet, from the perspective of the 3D being, it has simply moved in the vertical direction. In this way, when inhabitants of a lower dimension look at a higher dimension, its behavior seems extremely mysterious. A higher dimensional world might be exactly that kind of thing for us. And when we integrate these multidimensional theories with the research on quantum entanglement, one specific conclusion begins to emerge. In cutting-edge physics, this world is fundamentally a field of nothingness, and matter is considered to be nothing more than the peaks of waves that appear when that field is excited by energy. This field is a 2-dimensional information space at the edge of the universe, and our 3-dimensional world may be a holographic image projected from it. This is known as the holographic universe theory. A hologram is a projection technology where light emitted from a recording medium creates a 3-dimensional image in empty space, right? What the holographic universe theory suggests is exactly the same. The 3-dimensional universe we live in might actually be a grand holographic image, projected from a 2-dimensional information screen at the edge of the universe. Did you think there's no way that sounds like science fiction? But in reality, this concept is a cutting-edge theory that many physicists around the world are researching with absolute seriousness. For instance, research by Dr. Oguri and his team at the Kavli Institute for the Physics and Mathematics of the Universe at the University of Tokyo has mathematically shown the possibility that matter in this universe is in a state of quantum entanglement, with information on the surface of the universe and is generated as its hologram. Furthermore, research by Dr. Takayanagi and his colleagues at the Kyoto University Yukawa Institute for Theoretical Physics has shown that the area of space is determined by the amount of quantum entanglement present there. What this means is that if quantum entanglement is strong, space becomes close, and if it is weak, it becomes distant. In other words, space itself is a network of quantum entanglement. Think about it. What if the distance between you and someone you coincidentally meet right now is also determined by the strength of quantum entanglement rather than physical distance? That is precisely why someone you happen to sit next to can have a much larger impact on your life than someone on the other side of the planet. It's not a coincidence, but because you and that person are strongly bound by the invisible threads of quantum entanglement. Furthermore, another cutting-edge theory called loop quantum gravity reveals something even more astonishing. According to this theory, if you zoom into this universe to the ultimate microscopic limit, smooth space does not exist. Instead, it posits that there are only points where information travels and lines that connect them, essentially a network of quantum entanglement. It is as if the entire universe is a massive information network, much like a giant quantum computer. And from the perspective of neuroscience, this is an incredibly fascinating story. Because our brains have exactly the same structure, there are approximately 86 billion neurons in the brain, each connected to up to 10,000 other neurons through synapses. In other words, the brain is an ultra-high density network with over 100 trillion connections. The structure of your brain and the structure of the universe are surprisingly similar. Is this a coincidence? Perhaps it means that both the universe and we operate on the same principles. What these theories suggest is that time, space, and even matter are all ultimately born from an information wall at the edge of the universe, something similar to what the spiritual world calls the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records is a concept originating from ancient Indian thought, referring to a universal field of memory where all the information in the universe is recorded. At one time, this was thought to be a mere fantasy of mysticism. However, cutting-edge physics is beginning to prove this exact same structure through mathematical formulas. So, who exactly is the ultimate observer who determines this information into reality? It is the consciousness of each and every one of us. Our brains and consciousness are also thought to be projected from this high-dimensional information space. Integrated information theory, proposed by neuroscientists Christoph Koch and Giulio Tononi, defines consciousness as a kind of information pattern that arises as a result of integrating information networks within the brain. In other words, your consciousness is also information. If that's the case, don't you think it's possible for our consciousness to in turn influence the original information space? In fact, people who are exceptionally good at the law of attraction, or those who achieve success one after another, are unconsciously practicing this very technique, proactively influencing the information space from the side of their own consciousness. They don't wait for coincidences, they create them. By now, I hope you have a general understanding that our reality is determined by observation, much like a parallel world. Once you understand the mechanics of this world, you begin to see what successful people are unconsciously putting into practice. They are pros at observing the parallel world they desire. Now, I will explain the 7 characteristics of people who shift to a successful world line, all from the perspective of quantum mechanics. First, the first characteristic. They observe the world of existence. Many people focus their awareness only on what they lack. I don't have money, I don't have time, I don't have confidence, and so on. But think about it. As I've explained so far in the world of quantum mechanics, what your consciousness focuses on, what you observe, is determined as your reality. If you keep observing the state of lack, your private universe will continue to manifest that lack indefinitely. You might think. So instead of saying, I only have 1,000 yen, I should just force myself to be positive and say, I have as much as 1,000 yen. Actually, that's not quite it. On the contrary, it's known that trying to force positivity by suppressing negative emotions puts a strain on the brain and autonomic nervous system, which actually makes things turn out worse. The existence that successful people observe is not the physical reality right in front of them. What they are observing is the fact that in the information space, the parallel worlds, the pattern of their already successful self, exists as a solid reality of information. Even if they only have 1,000 yen in their wallet right now, they know that the self who possesses hundreds of millions in assets exist in the information space. That is why they aren't swayed by their current circumstances. Instead of lamenting the physical reality of not having money, they observe the truth of the information space, that the world line where I am wealthy already exists. This difference in the way of observing is the very first fork in the road that determines which door to a parallel world you will open. The second characteristic is that they are not bound by their past history in the slightest. Do you have people around you who say things like, I don't have a prestigious educational background, or I've been a salaryman my whole life, so there's no way I could start a business? This happens because they believe in a one-way flow of time, where the past determines the present and the present determines the future. However, successful people know a completely different rule of this world. That is the concept that time flows from the future to the past. For them, what defines them is not their past achievements. What defines them is the future self that is yet to arrive. They first set their future self in an ideal parallel world and observe that version as their true self. Then the law of causality is reversed, and that future becomes the cause, starting to influence who they are in the present. They live the present moment through the lens of how would my future self act, or what would my future self learn, making their past history completely irrelevant. This is the application of the concept of retrocausality, currently debated in quantum mechanics, to one's own life. The third characteristic is that they anticipate their future emotions. What this means is that they are feeling the emotions, sensations, and what we call vibrations, the hado of their ideal self on their desired world line right here in the present moment. Most people think, if I succeed, I'll be happy. However, for them, it's the opposite. By feeling happy first, they are choosing the world line where a happy reality manifests. This is a technique that applies the properties of quantum entanglement. It is said that quantum entanglement transcends space-time, allowing for information transfer from the future to the past. When the vibration of your current emotions resonates with the vibration of yourself in that ideal future parallel world, reality is pulled toward that future, just like a magnet. That's why people who attract success act and savor those emotions as if they've already succeeded, no matter what their current situation may be. The fourth characteristic is that successful people do not hesitate to let go of relationships and environments from their old world. The people around you are also observers, just like you. And the environment you belong to, for example, your workplace or community, serves as a place of joint observation where specific values are shared. When multiple observers continue to observe the same reality, saying things like, this is the kind of person you are, or this is what our reality is like, it becomes a powerful gravitational force that firmly fixes that world line in place. For example, even if you wish to become wealthier, what happens if the friends and colleagues around you continue to observe that it's impossible anyway, or will always stay just like this? A powerful attraction occurs that binds you to the world line of being unable to become wealthy. Successful people know the power of this joint observation. That is why they consciously distance themselves from relationships that pull them down and environments where people mutually validate an unwanted reality. They know that changing the people you associate with and the environment you place yourself in is one of the most powerful ways to shift your world line. The fifth characteristic is acting on the premise of already being there, rather than what if. Many people think, I'll do this once I succeed, like, I'll fly business class once I'm rich. But for successful people, it's the complete opposite. They act now based on the standard of, if I were my successful self, this is naturally what I would be doing. This isn't just about positive thinking or self-investment. In quantum mechanical terms, this is an extremely powerful act of observation that moves physical reality based on the premise that you have already shifted to your ideal parallel world. It's like declaring to the higher dimensions, I am an inhabitant of this world line, not just through words and thoughts, but at the physical level of action. That powerful observation anchors you even more firmly to that world line. Actually, this is based on a formative experience that decisively changed my own life. When I was in graduate school, I was in an extremely demanding laboratory, and while everyone around me was busy job hunting, I was so swamped with research that I couldn't prepare for interviews at all. As expected, I failed interview after interview, and even after Golden Week had passed, I had 0 job offers, a truly desperate situation back then. On top of that, I had already been completely rejected by my top choice company after the second interview. In fact, I had failed the first interview at the headquarters and was referred to a second interview at a group subsidiary, but I failed there as well. Normally, there would be no way to join that company anymore, right? But for some reason, to test the law of attraction, I decided to stage a job offer notification email and send it to myself from that company. I know it's probably not the right thing to do, but I created an email address under the company's name and scheduled it to be sent to myself 3 days later. Then, 3 days later, just when I had forgotten about it, the email arrived. You have been offered the position. When I saw it, my excitement spiked for a moment. But since it was my own doing, I quickly remembered, oh, that's right, I did this. But from that point on, I devoted myself to my research work as a person who had already received an offer. Then one day, something unbelievable happened. I received a phone call from that top choice company that was supposed to have rejected me, saying, a candidate turned down their offer, so would you like to come in for another interview? Is less than #0. 8# is greater than. It was a revival from the wait list. When I was called to the final interview at the company headquarters, the roster was filled with students from universities clearly ranked much higher than mine. The person who seemed like the head interviewer was sitting in the middle. He was incredibly intimidating, and to be honest, I couldn't speak very well. But I acted with total confidence, as if I had already secured the job offer. In the end, despite the nerves, the interview finished smoothly and I returned to my university. 2 days later, I got a call from the company, and to my surprise, they said, you've passed. Moreover, I was offered a position not at the subsidiary where I had previously failed the second interview, but for the flagship project at the headquarters Central Research Laboratory. I found out later that the intimidating head interviewer was actually an alumnus of my research lab. Of course, I don't believe there was any special treatment, but since our research fields aligned perfectly, it was easy for me to answer his questions. But what truly shocked me was the official job offer email that arrived afterward. The wording was, word for word, exactly the same as the fake email I had sent to myself. I seriously couldn't believe my eyes. There it was, on my phone screen, the exact text I had staged myself earlier. Because of this formative experience, I lived the reality that consciousness creates reality, and I experienced it firsthand. Driven by the desire to share this with as many people as possible, I have been working as a quantum brain coach for the past 10 years. I am certain that the sense of presence, the feeling that I had already received the offer and acting on that emotion, is what rewrote my reality. The sixth characteristic might sound a bit paradoxical. Successful people are dissatisfied with reality, yet satisfied with themselves. You might wonder, what does that even mean? What's important here is the difference between self-esteem and self-efficacy, also known as efficacy. Self-esteem is the sense of accepting yourself just as you are. On the other hand, self-efficacy, a concept proposed by psychologist Albert Bandura, is the absolute trust in your own abilities, the belief that I can definitely achieve this goal. Successful people have incredibly high efficacy. Because of this, they feel an intense dissatisfaction with their current reality, which they perceive as being inconsistent with their true abilities. It's a form of healthy irritation, thinking, with my potential, I shouldn't be in a place like this. Psychologist Leon Festinger named the strong stress generated between this ideal self and real self as cognitive dissonance. And this cognitive dissonance becomes the most powerful engine for forcing reality to catch up to the ideal. If we interpret this through quantum mechanics, this gap is precisely what creates a massive distortion or slope in the information space surrounding you. That distortion acts like powerful gravity, becoming the very force that pulls in a different parallel world that is worthy of your true abilities. And finally, the seventh characteristic, this might be the most important of all. It is that people who attract success possess overwhelmingly high abstraction goals. Many people set self-centered, ego-driven goals, such as I want to succeed or I want to become wealthy. Of course, that is not bad in itself. However, those who shift to successful world lines look much further ahead. They hold high abstraction goals that involve many more people than just themselves, for instance, wanting to make society or the world a better place through their own success. This relates to my own unique theory called the bioinformation core. While the specifics of the bioinformation core are highly confidential and something I cover in detail in my online program, the gist of it is this. Having a high abstraction goal explosively increases your information energy. As the distortion of the information field increases, it acts like gravity, pulling all the information necessary to achieve your goal, people, money, and opportunities directly into your world line. So, today we've discussed the 7 distinct characteristics of people who shift to a successful world line. What all of these have in common is the idea that life is a continuous series of choices deciding which parallel world to observe and establish as your reality. If you currently feel like you're somehow repeating the same failures, or that life just isn't changing, please know that it's not your fault. It's simply because until now, no one has taught you the true mechanics of this world. Once you overcome that barrier, the ideal parallel world where you possess the success and abundance you truly desire is within your reach. So, how can you specifically design your private universe and continue to observe the ideal world line? The core of that process, the entirety of the theory I call the bioinformation core, is so powerful that I cannot discuss it all here on YouTube. Therefore, I am releasing a special report that explains the full practical methodology available for free for a limited time. Due to industry sensitivities, this is information I can't share publicly on YouTube, so I'm distributing it as a limited access video. It's only available for a short period, so please claim it right now. I apologize if the distribution has already ended by the time you see this. Today, I have shared insights about parallel worlds and the law of attraction. You are a being of infinite possibilities, and you have the power to freely choose your world. What kind of world do you want to live in? Please tell me in the comments about the ideal world line you want to parallel shift into. Also, please share your thoughts or any questions in the comment section. I will use them as a reference for my future videos. If you found today's talk helpful at all, I'd be very grateful if you could subscribe to the channel and give this video a high rating. With that, I will see you in the next video.